Welcome to a special edition of 7 News. We have the latest on this coronavirus crisis. Here's what's coming up. Saving Australia, the bold plan to keep our nation afloat. No rent, no bills, no tax until it's all over. Could it really happen? A statewide lockdown looking more certain it could begin as early as tomorrow. What it means for you. The national death toll rises. Another cruise passenger dies, the 13th victim of coronavirus in Australia. And royal virus scare, Prince Charles recovering, but there are now fears he may have passed it to a number of high-profile leaders and celebrities.
Live from our Sydney headquarters, this is 7 News with Mark Ferguson.
Good evening. The Prime Minister is preparing to dial into a landmark phone conference tonight with leaders across the globe. The topic, how to save the world's economy, with some nations on the verge of bankruptcy, crippled by coronavirus. Closer to home, we've learned an unprecedented scheme is being considered to save Australian businesses and jobs. Tim Lester has more from Canberra. Tim, these are extraordinary measures. What more can you tell us?
Well, one of the measures under consideration is a kind of business hibernation plan. This is where the government would set up such that businesses particularly badly affected by the current economic crisis could hibernate for the winter. They wouldn't have to pay tax. They might not have to pay charges like even rent or debt repayments, depending on who the government could get to join the scheme, and would be able to resume business when the crisis eases, probably after the winter. Another issue that they're likely to discuss is further wage subsidies. The government has already got a wage subsidy plan of sorts, but apparently is looking at bolstering that to try to keep Australians employed. All of this will be informed by a meeting tonight of the leaders of the world's 20 biggest economies, the G20 holding a virtual meeting, so Prime Minister Morrison joining it from here in Parliament House. This as 80 countries have already sought IMF financial help, so the leaders are facing a crisis pretty much like no other. Then tomorrow morning, another virtual meeting for the Prime Minister. This, the National Cabinet, due to begin at 10 o'clock. It comes as state leaders consider the possibility of lockdowns, if not for whole states, certainly for areas where the virus has been concentrated. Just today, the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said that potentially the New South Wales government would be looking at area by area lockdowns. She says her government is prepared to go much further in this regard. And the Prime Minister has already spoken about the possibilities of these regionalised, particularly aggressive approaches at stopping the spread of the virus. That's National Cabinet tomorrow after a meeting of the G20 tonight.
OK, Tim Lester in Canberra, thank you. New South Wales is bracing for a total lockdown as the state government desperately works to try to contain this outbreak. Miley Hogan is in the city for us this evening. Miley, the Premier is expected to make a decision within days.
Yeah, good evening, Mark. Well, she certainly did give her strongest hint yet that is the way we are heading. She has not ruled out a lockdown. She has made it clear that we are at the beginning of this crisis and that she is willing to go it alone and introduce tougher restrictions if she feels that it is necessary. We are now at 1,219 cases here in New South Wales. If that number continues to climb, well, we could be headed for that lockdown. Let's have a listen to the Premier today and what she had to say about it.
We're a government in New South Wales prepared to go much further if we feel that's in the public safety, if it's in the interest of the public and the community. New South Wales is different to the other states, and if the information I get from the health experts suggests that the curve, as we call it, if cases aren't going in the direction we need them to go to, I will go further in New South Wales.
Miley, compared to our current situation, what would a total lockdown look like?
Well, we understand, Mark, that it could be area by area, but that does present its own problems. How would that be policed? How would the government enforce something like that if people were moving from suburbs to get to work and then living in another area? But what we can show you is some of the hot spots around the state. Waverley has the most cases at 105, the Northern Beaches at 68, Bankstown 41, Sutherland at 35, Ryde 33 and Blacktown 9:30. Now, the Premier will be taking part in that National Cabinet meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Of course, no major decisions will be made until that meeting happens. But after that, we should have a better idea if this lockdown is going to take place, Mark.
OK, Miley Hogan in the CBD. Thank you. A luxury hotel in the heart of the CBD is in lockdown tonight, packed full of passengers from a stricken cruise liner. 5 of them are showing symptoms and are undergoing testing in hospital this evening.
Herded home into a new corona crisis. 287 passengers from the Norwegian Jewel packed onto coaches at Sydney Airport. 5 others were escorted to hospital after showing symptoms of COVID-19. They were forced to charter a Qantas jet from Hawaii after their ship was refused entry to various ports.
So they were going to go to New Zealand and then they were going to go to Fiji. And then had to get turned around to Honolulu.
Now they're in lockdown at the Swiss Hotel on Market Street, 5-star corona accommodation in the middle of the city.
And I am just shocked and appalled that we were not consulted.
Amanda and her family live in an apartment above the hotel. Her husband has low immunity after a kidney transplant.
And I don't feel safe even going to the lift.
At a time when no other cruise ship passengers are allowed to disembark here to give authorities time to finesse quarantine measures, serious questions are being asked as to why Norwegian Jewel was so keen to get its passengers off its hands. As the Premier announced,
I can confirm that nobody will be getting off a ship in New South Wales until further notice.
Too late to stop lawsuits from the victims of the Ruby Princess debacle, where corona passengers were let loose, infecting others.
The state government and or the federal government could be liable.
And as the Artania floats off Western Australia with 7 corona patients, the WA government has called in the Navy to run the ship out of Australian waters, a new battle in the war on corona. Evan Batten, 7 News.
Many argue it should have started much sooner, but now all international passengers will be screened as they arrive at Sydney Airport under strict new border control measures. The decision comes after we showed pictures of huge queues inside one of the terminals. People can clearly be seen flouting social distancing rules, which prompted the government and health department to finally act. Now all international arrivals and some domestic passengers will have their temperature taken and be checked for symptoms. It's understood nurses have also been stationed at the airport to assist with that testing. It has been another good day on our share market, the 4th in a row. It follows the approval of a record stimulus package in the US. Our finance editor Gemma Acton has more. Gemma, that's had a positive effect here.
Yes, Mark, shares traded higher throughout the day, but that news out of America certainly helped to deliver a stronger close. We saw the ASX finishing up by 2.3%. The index managed to close above 5,000 points for the first time in the last 8 days of trading. Promising, yes, but still well below that 7,000 plus level we were seeing in mid-February. And today's buoyant share market certainly not matching this ongoing tide of negative economic news that we're seeing. Mark.
OK, thanks, Gemma. Prince Charles remains in isolation tonight after contracting the virus following weeks of public engagements. Sarah Greenarch joins me now live from London. Sarah, what more can you tell us about who he's been in contact with?
Well, Mark, the 71-year-old had contact with a lot of people over the past few weeks, so doctors are now going back through his diary, trying to figure out where he may have contracted the virus. They are looking especially closely at that summit on the 10th of March when he was sitting opposite Prince Albert of Monaco, who has also subsequently tested positive to COVID-19. It has also now been revealed that a flag bearer at the Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey on the 9th, they have tested positive too, and the entire royal family was at that event. Then a couple of days later, on the 12th, Prince Charles was the guest of honour at an Australian bushfire fundraising event. That is the same day that he last saw his mother, the Queen, at 93 years of age, here at Buckingham Palace. Now, doctors say because Charles only started displaying symptoms over the weekend, that the earliest he could have been contagious was the 13th, but that is a very slim 24-hour window. Having said that, the Palace is assuring us that the Queen is in good health. There is some debate here in the UK at the moment about whether Prince Charles qualified for NHS testing. The guidelines about who can be tested here are stricter than they are back home. Doctors and nurses are concerned that they're not being prioritised and other people are being ahead of those on the front line. But Clarence House says Camilla and Charles both met all the criteria. They are now self-isolating at their estate in Scotland. It's where they go every summer. It's where they spent their honeymoon back in 2005. But it's fair to say this little stint self-isolating separately will be pretty different. Mark?
Yeah, let's hope they are on the mend. Sarah, thank you. Our nation's coronavirus death toll has now climbed to 13. The latest victim, a West Australian man in his 70s. Rob Scott joins me now off the coast of Fremantle in WA. Rob, what more can you tell us about this victim?
Well, we've been told he's a man in his 70s, and 7 News understands he was a passenger on board the Celebrity Solstice cruise ship, which was one of several tied up alongside the Ruby Princess in Sydney last week, which we now know had a number of undiagnosed COVID-19 positive passengers on board. The man was being treated in an isolation room at a Perth hospital when he succumbed to the virus. His death, as we've heard today, is the 13th in Australia, 5 of those happening in the last 24 hours.
Now, Rob, you're floating off the coast of WA right now, where that cruise ship standoff is still underway. How has Sydney's cruise ship debacle, including the Ruby Princess, affected what's now happening behind you?
Well, basically, it is our Premier Mark McGowan's number one priority to make sure that what happened in Sydney does not happen here again. He says that none of the passengers on board the Tanya behind me, which we now know has 7 confirmed cases, will be allowed into Western Australia unless, of course, there is anyone on board with a life-threatening condition. And even then, he says he doesn't want any of the passengers, sick or not, coming anywhere near WA hospitals. He'd prefer them to be sent to a Defence Force base, which he says is a Commonwealth responsibility. We did see a very late concession this afternoon with a man in his 70s helped off the cruise liner by a police boat and officers in hazmat suits. We're told he's in a life-threatening condition, but that condition has nothing to do with coronavirus. But he has been taken to a WA hospital and put into isolation just in case. Again, our Premier making it adamant that this ship and another 2 which are heading this way are not welcome in Western Australia. They're not welcome to dock in Fremantle, unload any passengers. He says this is a Commonwealth responsibility and he wants them to move them all on. OK, Rob Scott off Fremantle. Thanks so much. Millions of cutting-edge coronavirus test kits will be rolled out in Australia next week. They should help many essential workers to get back on the job much faster. The tests, which show if someone has had the virus and become immune, could also slash time in self-isolation.
A finger prick is all it takes, just like a diabetes blood sugar level check. Only this test tells you within 15 minutes if you've had COVID-19 and whether you might have developed immunity.
This is particularly going to be important for the healthcare workers and aged care workers.
At least 1 million rapid test kits will be rolled out in Australia from next week. Essential workers given priority to get them back on the front line sooner.
The other thing that's going to be important with the antibody test is to be able to work out how many people have had the disease asymptomatically.
That is, without showing any symptoms. Britons will soon be able to buy the tests in shops and online. Once publicly available here, anyone required to self-isolate could benefit from these tests. A positive result for coronavirus antibodies, potentially slashing your time in quarantine from 14 to just 5 days. And another innovation, South Australian researchers working on medical drones that can monitor temperature, heart rate, even coughing and sneezing in crowds of people.
We'd also be looking for gestures that are associated with coughing and other sort of respiratory distress.
The flying robot's able to observe any place where people congregate, a spy in the sky in the war on disease. Alex Hart, 7 News.
Still to come in 7 News, how supermarkets are making it easier to avoid the panic buying chaos. Busting the myths around COVID-19, your questions answered. And in sport, NRL stars face an 87% pay cut. Will the desperate moves be enough to save the game? That's next. Welcome back. There are big changes being made to the way our supermarkets do business. The aim is to make it easier for the most essential members of our community to buy what they need. Coles opened its doors early this morning to allow our healthcare workers to stock up without the panic buying chaos.
There have been spas at supermarkets.
I just want 1 pack.
But this morning things were much more professional as essential service workers were let in to gather their essentials.
I'm quite emotional this morning because it's been weeks since I've actually done a proper shop.
At 7 a.m, the doors opened only for doctors, nurses, paramedics, police and firefighters.
I've got to go because it's opening.
Shift work means many can't get to the shops before they're stripped bare.
Yesterday I went here and nothing left for me, especially like some of these essential things.
What we wanted to do was open up this hour where they could come in at the beginning of the day, get what they needed in a calm environment.
Calls too for the government to step in to stamp out profiteering.
People are trying to make enormous profits out of the suffering that other people are enduring at this time.
And as customers continue to buy up big, more stores are bringing in restrictions on things like alcohol, while at Bunnings, generators, gas bottles, face masks and fuels are limited to just one per person. Soon they'll split customers' hours too.
From Monday, for trade customers and those working in the healthcare sector and emergency services, trading will be available to you up until 9 a.m.
Until people's buying returns to normal, supermarkets say dedicated shopping times like we saw this morning will continue, so everyone gets a fair chance.
Everyone's quite thankful and being patient and nice and understanding.
And that's needed now more than ever. Andrew Denny, 7 News.
Star NRL players will be asked to take a massive pay cut, up to 87%, if the 2020 season is cancelled due to COVID-19.
Everyone's cooperating greatly in the NRL family, and that's how it's got to be. You know, we've got to get through this together, and we can't fight amongst ourselves.
The cuts are still coming thick and fast where clubs are concerned. The Raiders Centre of Excellence will shut tomorrow and all staff will be placed on unpaid leave, while South's football manager Shane Richardson has resigned immediately to try to ease the burden on that club. The racing industry has been given some hope today after star jockeys Hugh Bowman and Tommy Berry returned negative tests for the virus. The pair was tested as a precaution last night because of people they'd been in contact with.
It was a weird feeling, and it was probably a stressful 24 hours just waiting for the results to come back.
The scare forced a host of meetings to be cancelled. An A-League player who broke quarantine to take a drunken joyride in a golf cart on the northern beaches has now issued a tearful apology. Tim Payne left Wellington's base at the Academy of Sport in Narrabeen and was found by police driving the buggy alongside teammate Oliver Sale on the Wakehurst Parkway early on Tuesday morning. The defender was charged with mid-range drink driving, and the fallout from the A-League's postponed season has already begun to take hold, with most club staff members already stood down. One of the world's leading anti-doping crusaders concedes the pandemic is the perfect cover for drug cheats. Travis Tygart, the man who brought down Lance Armstrong, says the longer drug testing is reduced or stopped in some countries, the harder it will be to weed out cheats before next year's Tokyo Olympics. Meantime, after a taxing NBL season both mentally and physically, Boomer star Andrew Bogut says he's not sure his body will be able to play another year to make it to the now postponed Olympic Games. You don't have to look far to find an endless supply of advice on how to keep yourself safe from coronavirus. But not all the tips you may be getting are backed by science, as Seven's Melissa Doyle explains.
Well, there's no denying for many it is a scary time, and there is plenty of false information floating around. So see if any of these tips sound familiar. Myth number 1, the coronavirus will go away as the seasons change. That is false. As the weather warms up or cools down, your internal body temperature stays the same, meaning the virus still survives inside you no matter what is happening on the outside. Myth number 2, hot air from hair dryers can kill the virus. Also false. The best way to protect yourself is to wash your hands with soap and water or hand sanitizer. Make sure you scrub thoroughly for at least 20 seconds. And if you're unsure, sing happy birthday twice as a guide. Myth number 3, COVID-19 is less deadly than the flu. This one is a little more complicated. Now, the mortality rate of the seasonal flu is 0.1% in the developed world. That means for every 1,000 people that catch it, one will die. Well, the figure for COVID-19 is still being researched, but initial studies have found it to be much higher, between 1 and 2.5%, meaning out of 1,000 people, between 10 and 25 will die. And finally, you should wear a surgical mask to stop yourself from catching the virus. This is also false. The World Health Organization recommends only wearing a surgical mask if you are already sick or if you're taking care of someone who is. There are many ways to keep yourself safe, but above all else, practice strict social distancing. And together, we can flatten the curve.
Thank you, Mel. Still to come in 7 News, what we can learn from animals about social distancing. And tomorrow's weather with David Brown. Welcome back. Social distancing is new to us, but not the animal kingdom. And while we now need to stay away from Sydney zoos and aquariums, animal keepers are making sure we remain connected.
At Sydney Zoo, the primates are really missing their human mates, struggling to find other ways to keep entertained. The lions are proudly lounging around, the tigers relishing in sweet solitude.
Good boy, Raja. When it comes to our tigers, they do love social distancing.
The virus is also a threat in the animal kingdom, keepers only approaching some with masks and gloves.
We're still learning which animals will contract the COVID virus from us, so we're just taking every precaution.
Back home, Wildlife Sydney Zoo and Sea Life Aquarium have been live streaming animal encounters on Facebook for the kids.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Thanks guys for watching. Bye. Warming hearts and prompting plenty of questions.
Why did they jump today? Mummy, why did they jump?
Now you'll see him circle around, have a look at his big tail. That's what he's using to steer with. There we go. Did you guys hear that big chomping sound?
It's keeping the kids interested and making them not feel so secluded in what is a very difficult time for them and everyone to understand.
Zookeepers keep these animals happy and healthy. The Zoo and Aquarium Association arguing even in a shutdown, the work here is essential and needs to continue. Some more grateful than others.
What are you up to?
Serena Andaloro, 7 News.
Time now to check on our weather with David Brown.
Thanks, Fergo. A mix of sunny breaks and a few showers today. Having said that, look, the showers few and far between, and most of them confined to the northern half of our city. As we go to the satellite, we're keeping an eye on areas of rain to the north of us this evening. The trough here is the main driving force. Now, the bulk of it will contract towards the Queensland border during the early hours of tomorrow morning. Just a few showers just lingering along parts of the coast tomorrow and also through the northern interior. Not a lot of rain, just a few millimetres. Nationwide, a stunning day is expected to unfold in Melbourne. 26 degrees tomorrow. For Brisbane, unsettled. The odd shower or two is likely, 27. Perth should be sunny and a forecast high of around 29 degrees. Back home, just some showers, mainly over the northeast corner tomorrow. The odd thunderstorm is also possible. Isolated showers is lingering along parts of the coast, and of course just the odd shower is also likely through the northern interior. Now, as we have a look at the forecast for the Sydney Basin for your Friday, I think it'll be dry for most of the day. Just the odd shower or two, mainly in the morning, and temperatures a degree or two higher than today. For the city, becoming fine, lengthy sunny breaks, and a forecast top there of 24 degrees. We're dropping down to 18 overnight. As for the next 7 days, let's check it out. Mostly fine across the weekend, a little bit warmer on Sunday, potentially 27 degrees in our west. Very unsettled on Monday. A few showers and storms are likely. So that's the latest weather. Fergo.
Good on you, David. Thank you. And that is 7 News for now. Sunrise will be back with the very latest from 5:30 in the morning. I'm Mark Ferguson from all the team. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night.